A pan, a tilt, and a little bit of pixie dust is all it takes in Hollywood to fool millions. But it's not all smoke and mirrors, you know. They've also got magic, like self-repairing glass. Well, that's if you forget to CGI broken glass into your scene after it's been shattered. Or how about a parallel universe where there are two Jacks in the Titanic? Okay, seriously though, who is this guy, and is he single? I got you, ladies, don't worry. And lastly, how about when the Dark Knight's not quite dark enough, and we see the camera crew show up on screen? As beautifully perfect as we think these masterpieces are, we are all human, and as such, everyone makes mistakes. Here's 10 terrible editing mistakes in movies, and like this video so you don't make any terrible mistakes of your own. Number 10, Pirates of the Caribbean is one of Disney's most renowned live-action film series. Its success in the box office comes from both Johnny Depp, its visuals, and the way it breathed new life into the pirate movie genre in a way that no other studio has really been able to replicate. But Jack Sparrow's finer flicks do come with their fair share of flaws, one of which being this interesting background character aboard the Black Pearl.
On deck, you scabrous dogs! On deck, you scabrous dogs!
Blink and you'll miss this one, but if you pause at just the right moment, you might catch sight of what appears to be a man in a white cowboy hat in the background right next to Jack Sparrow. If you're wondering what he could be doing on board, the current speculation is that he was a member of the film crew who accidentally was just in frame for this one shot. Tough luck for this guy, as I'm sure once it was discovered, he was probably sent to walk the proverbial plank. Number 9. Pretty Woman was one of the most memorable rom-coms from the 90s. I mean, how can you go wrong with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere both putting on such solid performances? It's a more modern take on the story of Cinderella, with Gere's character coming from the life of a wealthy businessman and Julia's coming from an adult life of prostitution. And while the two couldn't be more out of place with each other, this editing error shows another piece out of place.
Wow. You must be really smart, huh? I only got through 11th grade. How far did you go in school?
I went all the way.
It's pretty hard to miss, but if you didn't catch it, just watch what's in Julia's hands. Yep, that is in fact a croissant turned into a pancake. Now, while this may be a modern take on Cinderella, I can promise you that magic wasn't exactly canon in this movie's production. Some who have watched the movie have claimed that the pancake in the second shot was just the one from an earlier frame and that she just decided to pick it up over the croissant. Maybe it's because she could have dropped her croissant.
Stop! I could have dropped my croissant!
Yeah, this one might just catch your eye during transitions, but either way you spin it, one thing's for sure, I'm getting very hungry. Number 8. You would have had to have lived under a rock for the last 20 years if you haven't seen or heard of Harry Potter, with its first book being published all the way back in 1997, and the first movie releasing in 2001. It was a film that really put the entire cast on the map, with Daniel Radcliffe being an extremely well-known celebrity for his time, playing the boy who lived. And while these films are considered to be somewhat of timeless classics, even the classics come with issues. All right, did you catch it? Right there in the lower back left, you can see someone from the film crew taking a shot right next to the students. If you're wondering, there were hardly any cameras intended to be in the film at all, and it's clear to see that this guy isn't exactly Colin Creevey. One can be left to wonder how this ended up in the final cut of the Chamber of Secrets, but I mean, that is just sloppy editing work. Number 7. Set in ancient Rome, Gladiators, a film that follows the character Maximus as he goes through the transition of having once been a proud Roman general before being reduced to a common gladiator, which, regardless of how much you know about it, is quite the downgrade. The story itself is one surrounded by intrigue at the idea of politics in ancient Rome, where Maximus's will to win every single one makes for some pretty epic battles. Altogether, it scored pretty well among critics in the early 2000s, but I can guarantee that almost every critic missed this. Honestly, I can't blame anyone for missing this one, as I had to watch it back several times before I noticed the gas tank on the back of the chariot. I guess these things run on a little more than horsepower after all, but seriously, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the editor who missed this detail in the Colosseum during the next movie. Number 6. we're taking a look at one of the most iconic film franchises of all time, The Lord of the Rings. Spanning across 3 amazing films, the journey of Frodo Baggins is something many fans regard as one of the finest character arcs in the history of cinema. And from a visual standpoint, it's one of the most stunning series of the early 2000s, with scenes like the Battle of Daggerlad even showing some early forms of CGI. But even films of this magnitude have their fair share of cinema sins. If you look closely, you'll see the soldiers getting pulled off screen by wires rather than being smited by Sauron. It's only there for a handful of frames, but it's a massive error on the editing team's part. It's sad to think that seeing this mistake will take some of the magic out of this epic scene every time I watch these guys get blown away. But let's not let this be the one scene to ruin them all. Number 5. Some mistakes are easier to catch than others, and it really makes you wonder how they got past early screenings without a hitch. In the 1990 sequel to the film Die Hard, we see a mistake exactly like that. We're watching 3 of the movie's main characters around a table when Miller bends down to pick up a package and something doesn't seem visibly right.
1551. Mark.
Check. Later.
Adios.
It should probably go without saying, but that definitely was not Miller's hand grabbing the package. To make it worse, it was on screen for a pretty decent time, so I can't imagine that nobody actually saw this when editing. I can only guess that they saw it and figured nobody would notice, so they just didn't bother. Either way, it's pretty funny to see this mistake considering how out in the open it is. Number 4. When you look at the live-action superhero genre in general, it's dominated in this modern day by Marvel and their incredible series of films within the MCU. That isn't to say that comic book rival DC hasn't had their fair share of solid flicks though, notable exceptions being Wonder Woman and even the recently released Birds of Prey. However, before these films began to be the box office blockbusters that they are nowadays, we had the incredibly well-received Dark Knight Batman film from 2008. The movie was regarded a cinematic masterpiece of its time and still holds up well today. But as you may imagine, it wouldn't really be on this list if it was void of any errors.
First, dude, have all these rules and you think they'll save you. Rules and you think they'll save you.
If you look closely, while Batman is pushing Joker up against the wall, you'll see a lone cameraman filming from right behind the pillar. As Alfred says,
"Some men just want to watch the world burn."
But for this camera guy, I'm pretty sure he just wanted to get a good shot. Number 3. While we're talking about filmmaking masterpieces, why don't we take a look at 1993's Jurassic Park? When this film came out, it was easily the most realistic CGI we'd ever seen at this point. But the crew used a slew of other tricks to make the dinos feel like they were living and breathing over the course of the movie. One of the tricks is that the velociraptors were made as animatronics, and as such, they would perform an action like walking into the kitchen in this famous scene. However, there was a slim chance that they could topple over.
Jimmy, what is it? It's a velociraptor. Jimmy, what is it?
It's pretty easy to spot, but you can clearly see a hand going up towards the back of the raptor to steady its balance. Needless to say, this does rip some of the immersion out of the iconic scene, but hey, at least we didn't get the dino just falling over limply out of nowhere. Timber! Number 2. If there's one thing this list should tell you, it's that Hollywood has gotten loads better at masking movies in famous cinematic magic. And this allows us to buy into the immersion of certain films. That being said, these older films aren't necessarily bad. In fact, some, like our next entry, have stood the test of time, having been referenced left and right in modern media, such as other movies and TV shows alike. Jaws is purely iconic for its atmospheric music and unforgettable visuals, but even this 1975 thriller has a few minor mistakes.
The mothers, when they start taking their bottoms out and slamming into them rocks, boy. Get away from there, you goddamn fool, you! What's the matter with you, what a schluck?
It's super easy to spot the film crew amongst the group of boats, especially considering how massive the camera board was. Then again, maybe they were planning a scene where Jaws would crunch down on the massive piece of equipment, but if they did opt to do that, I bet it probably would have been the last shot. And your number one spot. So we've all seen that shot of the guy walking off into the sunset just before the credits roll. It's an iconic shot in general, but that iconicism can be to its detriment if done incorrectly. Most times it can be done with different camera cuts or general edits. However, if you aren't the most diligent editor in the world, what we end up with is closing shots like this one from the end of The Bourne Identity. It's pretty easy to spot, but on the off chance that you missed it, you can clearly see Jason from the film running off camera rather than disappearing behind the truck as was intended. And considering Bourne's serious overall personality, it's pretty hilarious to watch him basically Naruto run out of frame while trying to use the car as cover. Not to mention, it's not even the closing shot for the film, so why did he even need to disappear behind the car in the first place? Sheesh. Here's another one of our videos, and if you click it, you'll receive the gift of content. So head over there, and I'll see you guys over there on that video. Did you click it? Keep it right here on Top 5 Central. Don't actually, just click it. Bye. Goodbye.